Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Mans. It's been a little bit thundery after all our lovely hot weather. So, unfortunately, with intermittent rain showers, I've had to come into the study. It was nice, though, that earlier Isabel managed to come round to the garden where she's now, I think, allowed to visit. And she was able to be filmed reading our scriptures this morning. So, thank you to Isabel. And as ever, not only just for helping with the service, but for putting it on the PDF for those who don't have internet access. I've been encouraging you to let me know your family news, and I know we have missed so many important events in your lives. So the first thing I have to announce is a sad thing, and that's simply that Alan Wilkie's son Simon died in Africa, in Namibia, in fact. And that's just really tragic because they haven't been able to see each other for a while. So please keep him and his wife in your prayers. Moira Collette is his wife. On a cheerier note, I just found out, and didn't get time to print it, that Nora and Hope Hogg celebrated their 65th wedding anniversary in April. And more recently, on the 25th of June, congratulations to Jean and Jimmy Wright, who were married in St. Nicholas Church, Sighthill, on the 25th of June 1960. I think that means they are having their 60th wedding anniversary. Also, none of us will ever forget the wonderful singing tones and charm and poetry of Dudley Williams. He's no longer with us, but Dudley and Elma were married at Currykirk on the 18th of June 1980 by Gordon Simpson, followed by lunch at the Marchbank Hotel. So we still raise a glass to their ruby wedding, even though he's not with us, and we're thinking of you, Elma. Today's theme is really finding encouragement. Paul said a phrase, therefore lift your droopy hands and strengthen your weak knees by way of encouragement. And I think today we all need a little bit of encouragement faced with all the difficult issues in the world. I've been trying to maybe avoid some of those to give you a break for the news, but this morning I thought maybe we needed to discuss some of our thoughts and feelings. Also, before we begin worship, was instructed by the cameraman here at Raphael Film Studios that these Liverpool items, the nice glass here and the mug, have to be on display for the worship service. They match the blinds behind me. Apparently, someone won the league. Congratulations. I have a happy home. Let's share in our call to worship. The Lord will display His glory, the splendor of our God. Even the wilderness and the desert will be glad. The wasteland will rejoice and blossom with crocuses. There will be an abundance of flowers and singing and joy. The deserts will be as green as the hills. With this news, then, strengthen those of you with tired hands. Encourage those who have weak knees. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong and do not fear, for the Lord is coming to save you. Let us worship Him. Those are words taken from Isaiah 35. Let's pray. This is a prayer adapted from the Iona Prayer Book. Lord God, early in the morning, when the world was young and you made life in all its beauty and terror, you gave birth to all that we know. Early in the morning, when the world least expected it, a newborn child crying in a cradle announced that you had come among us, that you were one of us. Early in the morning, surrounded by respectable liars and religious leaders, anxious statesmen and silent friends, you accepted the penalty for doing good, for speaking truth, for being God. You shouldered and suffered the cross. Early in the morning, a voice in a guarded graveyard, footsteps in the dew proved that you had risen from death, that you came back to those and for those, even those who had forgotten, denied, or destroyed you. Early in the morning, in the multicolored company of your church on earth and in heaven, We celebrate your creation, your life, your death, your resurrection, your love for us. And so to you we pray, Lord, bring new life where we are worn. New love if we have turned hard-hearted. Bring forgiveness where we feel hurt and where we have wounded. And where we may feel we are prisoners of ourselves or our circumstances, open us to the joy and the freedom of your Holy Spirit. Amen. We're now going to sing To the Lost, Christ Shows His Face. It's another one of those BBC songs of praise, and it's quite lovely, and I think the words are very poignant. So let's listen to the Lost, Christ Shows His Face.
Christ is the Lord in rich reproof. Christ has the former servants to love. Christ is the voice which calls us to care. And Christ is the one who leads us in. To the lost Christ shows His face. To the unloved He gives His embrace. To those who cry in pain or distress, Christ makes with His friends a touching place. Feel for the people we most avoid, strange or bereaved or never employed. Feel for the women and feel for the men who feel that their living is all in vain. Feel for the lives my life confused, riddled with doubts, beloved abused. Feel for the lonely hearts conscious of sin, which longs to be pure, but fears to begin. To the lost Christ shows His face. To the unloved He gives His embrace. To those who cry in pain or disgrace, Christ makes with His friends a touching place.
Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're listening or watching this sermon. We will carry on today. But first of all, I have to say congratulations to Liverpool, because this is why I am here and Darren is at the other side of the camera. Believe it or not, they won the Premier League last night after 30 years of trying. So, good, and I would like to also say, while I'm here, hi to everyone in the Guild. We've missed you all, and we were really, really looking forward to all meeting again. And a very, very special congratulations to Jean Wright. We celebrated our diamond wedding on the 25th. The first reading is from Hebrews 12, verses 1 to 3 and 12 to 15. Paul writes to encourage the Hebrew church, and this can be found on the NIV Bible on page 1210. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer, the perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. Make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and mislead others. The second reading is from Luke chapter 13, verses 10 to 17. And this is Jesus heals a crippled woman on the Sabbath, and can be found on the NIV Bible at page 1046. On a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." Then he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. Indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, the synagogue leader said to the people, "There are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath." The Lord answered him, "You hypocrites! Doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what bound her?" When he said this, all his opponents were humiliated, but the people were delighted with all the wonderful things he was doing. This is the word of the Lord. Amen.
Hi again. Today's gospel story is a really lovely reminder that Jesus always cared for people who were hurting or troubled. When he encounters this poor stooped over woman, he is just filled with compassion for her. He saw that her body was hunched over, maybe it was scoliosis, maybe she was born that way, but whatever it was, she was all cast down in a sort of lockdown of sorts, really. Her field of vision was narrow. She would only ever be able to see the floor or just look at the feet in front of her. But not just her vision was cast low. Because of her disability, she would have been socially alienated, treated as an outsider, a second-class citizen. The religious authorities of the day assumed somehow that disability was a sort of punishment for some sort of sin that either you or your ancestors had committed, and so they will have looked upon her with great contempt. So she wasn't just cast down physically, she was also cast down in spirit. And then this wonderful, uplifting interaction where Jesus straightens her up and heals her, raising her to a new life where she can hold her head up high. She can now see people's faces, she can make eye contact, she can tell if people are smiling. So she's now free from both physical and social shame, free to feel joy in a newfound liberty. Of course, there were the detractors. The focus of the story moves from this joyful moment to the reactions of the Pharisees. The religious leaders also suffered from limited vision. They also looked down, only not at the ground. They looked down upon other people, the people they thought were beneath them. Here was a woman for one thing, and a crippled woman for another. And yet Jesus detested all their judgmental rules and their laws that they had created and complicated and used to exclude others and to maintain their status. Of course, when Jesus came along with his radical compassion and humanity, he threatened their status quo. They were infuriated and needed a reason to attack him. So what greater reason than to tell him that he had broken the law, he had healed on the Sabbath, and healing was considered to be an act of work, and work was forbidden on the Sabbath. These men really lacked the one thing that Jesus had in abundance, and that was compassion. So Jesus slightly shamed them when he pointed out that they would probably treat their own animals better than they would treat this poor woman. In Luke's Gospel, there are 6 times when Jesus teaches or heals on the Sabbath. He wanted to teach that the Sabbath was intended to worship God, but that worship includes caring for people on the periphery, those who are marginalized or hurting or in need, whatever race or gender or ability. I couldn't help but think that this story speaks very much to our time these days. Someone in the newspaper this week, a journalist, described the coronavirus epidemic as an amplifier of inequality. The poor, the weak, those with disabilities, or from black and other ethnic minorities are more likely to suffer. Children of less well-off families more likely to fall behind with school. But I think prevailing inequalities and systemic racism and prejudice really shocked us with the terrible death of George Floyd. George Floyd was himself cast down because he was black and endured systemic racism. But more importantly, he was held down by a man who unceremoniously abused a symbolic gesture by taking the knee upon his neck for 8 minutes. By chance, someone videoed the incident when so many other incidents like that have gone unobserved and unnoticed and uncriticized. As Christians, for one thing, but even just as human beings, it's hard to accept or even understand how racism and anti-Semitism still exist. After the atrocities of World War II, we made so much progress when with the United Nations came the Declaration of Human Rights, the Declaration of the Rights of Children. I encourage you to reread them. They're very eloquent about the innate freedoms that all people should have and their rights to security and happiness and not being oppressed. There's a composer who, again, was on the radio this week. His name is Matt Richter, and he has just set the Declaration of Human Rights to music. The way he described the document and the way he's tried to articulate it with his musical themes, he said it's a document of hope. It's certainly not a document of reality, because he knows that racially motivated murders and genocides still take place. A little bit of a geek listening to Radio 4 in lockdown. This week, Melvin Bragg was discussing a philosopher. I had never heard of her. Her name is Hannah Arendt. She was a German Jew who very fortunately managed to escape from Germany in 1941. She went via Europe off to America. She had a really profound interest in what is it that can allow people to dehumanize other people. She wanted to understand the murderous totalitarianism that had spread all across Europe when she was a youth. So here are some of her observations from her writing. She observed that in most of those cases, a leader had emerged who told people simple-minded answers to all their problems. That leader would motivate people to believe and accept their ideologies using fear tactics to intimidate anyone who questioned or disagreed or fell out of line. She said, under such terror and militarization, it's fascinating how some people begin to lose the ability to think for themselves. They become idle to argue. In a particular example, she was interested in a man called Karl Eichmann, a real perpetrator of the Holocaust who sent millions to their deaths. She thought maybe he was an innate evil psychopath, but then when she went to watch his trial, she discovered that he was nothing more than a high-level bureaucrat, a glorified desk clerk, a thoughtless civil servant. She said he spoke in cliches. He seemed to feel he ought to be rewarded for doing a good job by following orders well. Arendt noted that under this ideology of Nazism, a lot of human beings were somehow split from their own humanity. Everyone was regarded simply as a job holder. Everyone's worth was defined by their usefulness or function. She then wrote that if you can actually reduce people to be no more than a body or a job that they do, if you can take away their right to or sense of their own person, it becomes easy to tell them what to do, and more importantly, it becomes easy to kill them as if they were a flea. Profound thinking. I couldn't help but think, isn't that exactly what the slave trade did to African people all those years, 246 years of slavery in America? It reduced people to a function. Black people regarded merely as disposable bodies. Even though slavery was abolished in 1863, when it ended, a lot of states, particularly in the south of the US, racist police and lawmakers and landowners did just what the Pharisees did in Jesus' day. They constructed a whole set of new laws, not just the Jim Crow laws, but they had other laws that were so minute, like if you were crossing the road in the wrong way, or for a black minister to preach to black people, it was considered an arrestable offense. And of course, if you were arrested by the police, then automatically they could send you to punishment. And what was the punishment? Slave labor. So it was just another way of coming full circle and keeping the systemic racism going. We might all be thinking, but wasn't all that a long time ago? Haven't we moved on? Why are people bringing all that up now? But sadly, lockdown has been a kind of harsh reminder that we still have an awful lot of work to do. In lockdown, we've had a lot more time to think. And all around, the news that we have heard has been hard. We're really aware that our generation and the generation coming after us have been lumbered with incredible responsibilities. Responsibilities for climate change, for the demands of a deathly pandemic and its consequent recession, the fight against terror, the refugee crisis, and more certainly, as we have been made so aware, the need to combat inequality, to be vigilant against racism and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, totalitarianism, elitism, all forms of patriarchy. It is really uplifting when I've been doing my little walks around Curry to see how many people, even here in Curry, who may not feel directly in touch with the events in America, but it's reverberating all around the UK, wherever people have been sensing prejudice because of their skin color, how many people have been putting up signs next to their rainbows saying Black Lives Matter. We care. But I have to acknowledge, maybe in my own house and in my own family, and I think from speaking to some of you, that we are tired. Lockdown has made us tired because we're news weary. We're weary of hard, difficult news. We're afflicted with uncertainty and concern. So many of you have had to miss cancelled celebrations. You've had loved ones who are far away, maybe have even died a long way away, having to grieve isolation. Lockdown, for many people, is tiring. And the tasks at hand, the issues of the world, can seem overwhelming. The problems and injustices too big to embrace. That's why I really liked our second reading this morning. This reading from Hebrews is often matched with that story from Luke. Paul is writing to the young church at a time when they are all very, very tired. Standing up for what they believed, overcoming class difference, caring for the poor under the Roman rule was difficult. Not to mention they were experiencing almost mocking denigration and disapproval from the Jewish authorities themselves. So Paul, in order to lift their spirits, describes this Christian life as being like an endurance race, but maybe not how we feel at the start of the race, maybe how we feel towards the end of the race. And so in order to encourage them to continue the race with perseverance, he reminds all these new followers that they are not alone. They are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. In the chapter before the verses that Isabel read, Paul has listed lots of these witnesses in heaven, including Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Moses, David, Solomon, Esther. On and on he lists them because he wants the new Christians to remember their fathers and mothers of faith, to see how even in their stories God was working in human lives to resolve human problems. God was working to emancipate people from slavery, to liberate them from captivity, to save people from sinful ways, to heal their wounds, and to lift their weary heads. Paul says they ran the race, now it's our turn to run the race with perseverance, and we must cast aside everything that hinders us, any fear or doubt or sin. I came across a lovely story about an old phone box, and some kind Christian person had put a sticky note in the post box that said, "If you are tired of sin, read John's Gospel chapter 3. But underneath, someone had taken a graffiti pen and said, "But if you're not tired of sin, call this number 555-1763. Just to cheer you up." In the end, Paul continually uplifts the spirits of the Hebrew church by pointing to Jesus himself, for who more than Jesus can understand that life lived with real humanity and compassion, with real concern for injustice, is going to come at a cost. Paul knew, as I'm sure many of us know, that working without encouragement for a good cause, even such as justice and equality, can be tiring. Doing good work can also be difficult. It can mean people don't get promoted at work. It can mean they're ostracized from communities. It can mean they're underpaid, and it can be dashing when people treat them with disdain. So he wanted to remind them, as he reminds us, to have hope. He reminds us that we are not alone. Our predecessors in faith are with us, and most importantly, Jesus himself is with us. Paul reiterates these words that he had taken from the Isaiah chapter 35 that we started off with in our call to worship, when Isaiah had to give hope and uplift the spirits of the persecuted people of this time. He used these great words, "Therefore, lift your drooping heads and strengthen your weak knees." The problems facing our world might seem enormous, but Paul reminds us God is with us, as are all the heavenly souls who thought and lived and in some cases gave life for the good. The work doesn't end. It's never finished. It just falls upon us to keep it going. To be able to see a stooped old lady and not define her by her disability or her body, but to see her as a lovely human being who has gifts to share. Here's a little story that I came across that I felt summed all of this up. There was a group of refugees who were fleeing over some rugged terrain when they were approached by a frail old man and a young woman with an infant. The leaders of the pack who were fleeing agreed to let them come along, with the understanding that the fit men would each take a turn carrying the infant, but that the old man and the mother would have to make it on their own. But a few days into the journey, they were thirsty and hungry, and the old man grew tired. He started stumbling, and he fell to the ground, and he explained that he was too tired to continue. He asked to be left to die. He felt hopeless. Facing the harsh reality of the situation, the leaders of the group decided maybe that was best, and they moved on. But the young woman immediately placed her baby in the old man's arms and kept walking with the rest of the pack. It took her a wee while to be able to turn around and even look behind her. But after a few minutes, when she did allow herself to look behind her, she saw that the old man was walking along the trail holding her child. He was cuddling it in his arms. He had a newfound hope and a newfound purpose. Wherever we do have hope, and wherever we find encouragement, and we remember that we are not alone in our struggles, even though we seem quite isolated from one another these days. But when we know our purpose is deeper than that, to care for one another, then we suddenly discover that we're not so tired. We find the new strength and the courage that we need. Jesus had the ability to encourage people like that and also to free people from all the sort of narrow-minded thinking or prejudices or from all sort of spiritual or physical disabilities. He challenged false standards and hypocrisy and prejudice. And so, wherever we choose to stand or to care, we have to remember He is with us. So I finish with, to whom it may concern, lift up your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees. I'm going to invite us to bow our heads in prayer. Dear God, help us to broaden our vision of your nature and help us to respond to your calling, whether it suits or not, whether convenient or not. May the whole human community reflect your light and beauty in their love for God and neighbor, displayed by our prayer and worship and godly living. May no corruption, hypocrisy, cruelty, or injustice go unchallenged in any place or part of our world, however unpopular challenging might be. Help us to create a society that protects the vulnerable, and help us to encourage mutual care and support. May our care for the young and the elderly imitate the faithful and generous love of God. And may we overcome any of our prejudices, grievances, or opinions that hinder us, so that in God's love we may look at one another face to face and practice the liberating work of forgiveness. May all those whose bodies cause them pain or immobility be affirmed in value by loving encounters with people who care. May those who feel spiritually low be set free by an encounter with the loving God, through the love of those who care, through their words and their kindness. And may those who have died live forever in the joy and peace of heaven as your children of promise. And may those who miss their company greatly be protected, comforted, and supported. Amen. I'm going to indulge us in a piece of music after the benediction. You'll have to forgive us, just for Darren. In the meantime, I simply pray that God's peace will guard your hearts and guide your thoughts, and that the love of God, our Father, the Son, and our Holy Spirit may go with you and be with you and all those whom you love, this day and forevermore. Amen.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of a storm, there's a golden sky and the sweet silver sound of of love. 我看